Hey, what's up guys? Chris Drini here for Chris Corp Productions. Welcome to another basic tutorial in After Effects. Today we're going to be covering how to make titles and animating them. So we're going to be creating text, animating text, using the range selector tool inside of After Effects to make some fancy animations. And we're going to be looking at 3D text. Finally, in the last part of this tutorial, we're going to be adding some texture to our text by using some alpha mats and pretty interesting stuff. So we'll see that in the end of this tutorial. But this is all part of a series of videos, basic videos to get you started with After Effects. It's pretty much just to master the basics in 10 different steps. So right now we're up to titles and animating titles. I hope you've seen the rest of these tutorials that lead up to this one. If not, you can go to my website or on my channel on YouTube and you can find all those there. But as of recording this tutorial, I haven't done these yet because they're released every Friday. But once they're all up, you're going to be able to find them all in order on my website. So if you go to the link, you'll be able to find all 10 different steps here, and you can view each one of them. And hopefully by step 10, you will know pretty much a lot of new stuff in After Effects, and you'll be able to know how to do a lot more exciting visual effects stuff. So this is pretty much just to level the playing field of everybody that watches my videos so that we can start making some exciting explosions and other cool stuff like that. So let's jump back into After Effects and let's get started. What we want to do is create a new composition. So go under Composition, New Composition. Set it to whatever you like. In this case, it's just a regular full HD composition that's 10 seconds long. And we have our new composition. So the first thing we want to do is create a text, obviously. And there's two main ways to do this. The first way is by using the text tool over here, or you can right click in your timeline panel here and go under New, Text. Once you do that, you can type in whatever you like. Boom, Chris Corp Productions. Did I spell that right? Yeah. Alright, so now we have our text created. So this is pretty much the first step. You've created a text, but it might not look how you want it to look. So you want to customize this and make it look more personal. So that's where we go into the character panel over here. And if you don't have this panel or pretty much any of these other panels, you can go under Window and you can have those pop up. So let's say I close out Paragraph and Character. I can go back to Window, Character, boom, it's back there again, Window, Paragraph, and now I have it back there. And that goes for any panel in After Effects. So let's get started. And with the text selected, you can either select it by using the selection tool, or if you're still in your text tool, you want to make sure that all of it is selected. Because if you only have this part selected, if you make any modifications, it will only be to the part of the text that's currently selected. So you can select all of it or use the selection tool. Now let's go over here, and the first thing we can do is we can change the font of this. So we can do this a couple of ways. You can click here and pick whatever font you'd like this way, or you can click in here and use your arrow keys to just pretty much browse through all the fonts that you have. Now let's say you actually know the font by name, and to save some time, what you can do is if you select this, you can start typing in the name of the font and it will pretty much come up. So similar to how you look for effects in the Effects and Presets tab, you can type in for the effect that you're looking for. Well, you can do the same thing in this panel over here. So this is a great font, by the way. You can find it for free in Dafont. I always have a hard time saying that website, but the link is in the description. There's a lot of great fonts, and you can actually test them out how they would look before you even download them. So that's pretty cool. But I really recommend this font. It's called Novecento, and it's used for a lot of motion graphics and cool stuff like that. And there's a couple options that come with this font. If you go to the next drop-down window, you can select light, normal, medium, demi-bold, and bold. And what that does is it's pretty much just changing the thickness of your font. So that looks pretty nice. And let's say you want to change the color of this font. Well, you can go to this box over here, click on that, and you can make it any kind of color that you'd like. Boom. Another cool thing that you can do over here is if you bring this to the front by clicking on it, and if you click on it again, you can actually select the color, and it will create, if I zoom in here, it will create an outline for your text. Now you can control how thick this outline is by going down here. You can punch this up, make it smaller or non-existent or really huge. But what you can start to see is that this kind of overwhelms your original text, as you push it up too much. So there's a way to fix this. I mean, you might want it this way. It kind of creates a new looking font, I guess, so you might like that. But if you don't want that, you can go over here and you can select fill over stroke. So no matter how thick this this outline will be, it's always going to be behind your text. So that's a pretty useful difference over here, you know, and you can always control how thick it is by using this this part over here. All right, so down below here, you can actually stretch your text vertically, or you can go over here and stretch the text horizontally. All right, another thing that's pretty cool that you can do here is you can increase the spacing between each character by you know, messing around with this, and you can make it all crunched up and tight together. Play around with this stuff and see what everything does. You have a couple more options here. You can make it all caps, or you can make it like staggered caps, I guess, where the first letter of the word is capitalized and the rest of them are still capitalized, but you know, a little bit smaller. And then you have your regular paragraph options and all kinds of alignment stuff, which I'm not going to go too much into. You know, you can play around with that yourself and see what that does, but it's all pretty self-explanatory. You know, if you put presents over here, right now it's centered, but if you go to the side, you know, you have it to the side, or to the opposite side, you have it here, and so on and so forth. So definitely play around with all these settings and see what everything does and get more familiar with them. Alright, now before we start animating this text in any kind of way, the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that it's centered. And a quick way to check that is if you go down here and you click on Title Action Safe, it'll pop up these dimensions or guidelines over here. And you can see this this plus thing over here, and what this is pretty much the center of your composition. So we can use that to pretty much center our text. So didn't have to do much; it was already pretty centered. You know, we can toggle this off once we centered it, and we can move on to animating this text. Now, if you see my other tutorials, you know, you can animate this text by using the position, scale, rotation, transparency, and keyframing some of these values, moving forward in time, and you know, making some cool animations. So what we have so far is just this text fading up onto the screen. So we can do the same thing with the scale and then position and rotation and other parameters here, but that's not what we're going to be looking at specifically in this tutorial, because we covered most of this stuff in the tutorial for animation in After Effects. So what we're going to be doing is taking a look at animation specific to texts in After Effects. So I'm going to undo that real quick, and if I expand the text properties, you can see that on the side over here it says Animate. Now if you click on here, you have a couple of options, and what we can do is select scale, just as an example. And the reason why I'm picking this is just to show you that this scale is different from animating the scale of the text layer itself. So if we look over here, it says Range Selector, and this is a tool that I really want to cover because it can allow you make a lot of cool animations with text. If we expand this, we see a start and an offset. So if I keyframe the start, you can see that right away these two lines have appeared at the beginning and end of the text. So by keyframing the start, if I move forward in time and I bring this up all the way to 100, if you notice, that line traveled from all the way over here across the text to the ending of the text. So if I play this back, you can see that it's moving across the text, and we're not seeing anything happen, and that's because we haven't changed the value of the scale yet. So let's say I put this to 0. What this will now do is if I ramp preview it, you can see that as that line is traveling across our text, all of those letters, all those characters are now scaling up to the original value. So this is definitely pretty cool. You know, you can mess around with all these settings. You can even have the opposite by animating the end position instead of the start. And if we go here in advanced, something that's pretty useful is instead of animating the characters, you can decide to animate the words instead. So instead of having each character scale up, you can have each word scale up. And if you want the entire word to scale from one starting point instead of each letter having their own, you can scroll up and go onto more options, go under anchor point grouping, and instead of it being based on the character, you can again select word. So now the entire word scales up from a center point of the text. So now you can see that instead of having each letter scale up individually from its own origin point, you now have each word scale up from a single point, which in this case you can see it right there is that little X. So that's what that does. And you can always add more animations, and there's a couple different ways to do that. You can either go back here and add a whole different one, or you can even add one from right here. And what the difference is that this will actually follow the settings that you already made. So if you want to start a whole new one, you can go back to the top. But if you want to add something that kind of follows some of the animation that you already made, you can just add another animation from right here. So definitely cool stuff. You can really experiment with each one of these. The range selector tool, again, can be used in many different ways. So it's all a matter, like I always say, is just to play around with all that. But anyways, let's move on and let's take a look at a couple more things. And you can always delete these. You can select animator 1 or animator 2 or anything else that you added. You can always select it and delete it. So now we don't have anything, it's back to normal. A cool thing with After Effects, it actually has a lot of presets that you can just apply to your text. So if we go to the top here, animation presets, text, you see a whole bunch of stuff, and each one of these folders, has several effects. So there's definitely a lot to pick from. So let's say I just add this to my text and RAM preview this. You can see what that does. Wow, that can really give someone a headache. But there's a lot of cool stuff that's just ready for you to just drag and drop. And cool thing about all these animations, you can completely customize the speed and several other things about it. So if I hit U on my keyboard, that brings up all of the keyframes of this animation. So you can see that what it's doing is animating the rotation and the opacity. So I can make this animation longer by stretching these out. So if I RAM preview this, you can see that it's taking a little bit more time to set into place. And this text is animating in, but if we want this to animate out, all we have to do is just switch the keyframes up. So push these the other way around. So now it goes out that way. You can always select all the keyframes, move them in time wherever you want this animation to occur. And we pretty much covered all this in the animating portion of these videos, so you should be familiar with keyframes. But I just wanted to show you this to remind you that all of these have keyframes to it. So even though you're using a preset, that doesn't mean that you can't still have some control over it. So this is something else that you can go ahead and explore. There is a ton of them. I haven't personally gone through actually any of these. This is the first time that I'm starting to apply some of these. But also keep in mind that whenever you're adding these presets in, it actually adds them at the point in time that you're in with your current timeline indicator. So if I do this again and I am at 4 seconds and I drag that in, you can see that the animation will only start after 4 seconds. So you can always move these around afterwards, but that's just something to keep in mind. But let's move on to 3D text. Now, what we're going to be covering in this portion of the tutorial is not actual extruded 3D text like you see in some really cool intros, but we're actually going to be looking at flat text that can float around and do different kinds of stuff in 3D space. You want to make this text 3D. So the way you do this is, right now in my case, I need to click this button down here, and this will reveal certain properties. You can toggle back and forth between different properties here. In this case, we want these set of properties to show up because this is how we activate 3D for this particular layer. So if I click this cube over here, now our layer is 3D. And if you ever use any 3D application, you can see this very familiar y-axis, x-axis, and z-axis way of moving things around. So you can push this up or side to side. This is pretty much the same as when it was 2D, only it's doing it in 2D space. And now you can also push this closer to you and away from you, which seems like it's only scaling it up or down, but that's because we haven't created a camera or any of that yet. But what you can also do is rotate this text, so now you can really see the 3D happening. You can go around the y-axis. Again, remember, all of this can be animated. If I hit R on my keyboard, you can see that all of these separate axes and the orientation of this layer will now show up, and they all have a stopwatch next to them. So that means you can animate all of this, which is pretty cool. That's how you create text in 3D space, and this can be used for other things as well, like any layer in After Effects that you can make. You know, let's say we let's make this like a small solid. We can make this 3D. So now you can really see those layers interacting in 3D space. So it can be really useful depending on what you're doing. I'm going to show you a quick example. I'm going to sidetrack a little bit and create a camera just to show you some fancy ways that you can use these techniques. So let's have this solid as a background. So we're going to want to make this pretty big. Let's add a ramp effect. There we go. And we can leave it like this. We can change the colors over here. You know, definitely check out my effects tutorial because I'm going to be speeding through some of this stuff. So, you know, that looks okay. Before we start doing anything major, let's actually create a new camera. So if I right-click here, new camera, this window pops up, and you know we can pick all the settings that we want. Now I'm not going to mess around too much with these settings because that's not what this tutorial is about. It's just to show you what you can do with 3D text. The perspective of things have changed, and that's because we're actually seeing this through a 35mm lens now. So what we can do is either scale this down or move this back, or even move the camera back. If we go to the camera tool up here, if I click on this and I keep my my mouse click, I have a bunch of options on how to move this camera around in 3D space. I can orbit the camera, track the camera, or kind of dolly in and out. So this is what I'm going to be selecting. You can see that our cursor has now changed, and I can push in or push out. So again, let's take a look at that again, and let's pick orbit camera, and now I can orbit around my my scene over here. So you know, this opens up literally a whole new world of what you can do in After Effects. I'm not going to spend too much time with this, just because this might start to become more advanced than what we're covering, but just know that this is how you can make a 3D scene in After Effects. Now obviously you can't really have real 3D geometry unless you're using something like Element 3D or something like that, but you can have flat layers that are in 3D space, so you can definitely create a lot of interesting stuff. So with that being said, let's take a look at the final part in our tutorial. So what I'm going to do is create a new composition, click OK, and what I'm going to do is create a new text. We should be good at this by now. And let's type in alpha matte. You know, let's change a couple settings here. Just make this white. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Let's make it all caps. Oh, too big. And let's center this. And there we go. All right. So what I'm going to be doing next is importing a texture. Alright, so now I'm just going to drag this and bring it into my, my composition here. And this is a pretty high-res picture, so we might want to scale this down a little bit. We can also rotate it 90 degrees so we can get the full thing over our text. And now I'm going to show you a very easy trick to add some texture to your text, and you can use this in many other ways. I'm just doing this specific example to just add some texture to our otherwise flat white text. Now we want the other set of properties, so let's switch to these other properties over here, and you can now see that we have some options as far as track matte. With this bottom layer selected, if I select alpha matte, now our text is actually going to show this texture. So even if I move this texture around, you can see that we now see it through our text. And this is definitely really cool for creating titles. If you haven't checked it out, I've actually made a tutorial. This is a little more advanced, but I've made a tutorial on recreating the intro from The Walking Dead, and I do use this technique a lot in that tutorial, so feel free to check that out. I'll post a link in the description, and there will be an annotation on this screen. But this is definitely a really cool trick to create some interesting looking text in After Effects. Now another way to do this is if I undo this, no track matte, if I select alpha inverted matte, now our text is kind of cutting a hole in this picture. So it might look like black text, but if I toggle on the transparency, you can now see that it's really a hole cut into this grungy texture. And if I move this around, it will update automatically. So this is definitely really cool. You can always change these settings anytime, and everything will just update automatically. So again, remember, when you're doing with alpha matte, you can either do alpha inverted matte, and that will kind of cut a hole into the texture that you're using, or you can use alpha matte, and that will fill in the text with the texture that you want. So anyways, guys, I hope this all helped. Again, some of the parts were a little too fast, especially the animation part. Definitely check out these previous tutorials, and the rest of these tutorials will be up soon. In 3D camera tracking, we'll be looking more at the camera feature in After Effects. But there's definitely going to be a lot of stuff to look forward to, and we're going to be soon creating a lot of exciting effects. So until then, my name is Chris Trini for Chris Car Productions, and I will see you next time.